Hi everybody, it's Laura from Green Tree, and today we're talking about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, ramen noodles. I know. People think of ramen noodles as kind of like a college food, something that people eat when they need something quick and cheap. But there's so much more to ramen. It's practically the national dish of Japan. Now, obviously, I'm not Japanese, so I don't have all of the traditional ingredients here today, but I'm going to give you a primer, a rundown on the different kinds of ramen, how you can eat it, how you can make it, and we'll do our best with what's available here in Mount Pleasant. So, first off, what you guys are probably most familiar with are the little instant packets of ramen like this. Instant ramen was actually only invented in 1958. Before that, all ramen noodles were handmade. This was actually a huge advance in the making of ramen to be able to do these little packets. The ones that we carry here at the co-op are, they have organic wheat noodles and they don't have MSG, so you don't have to worry about the extra weird additives. So the way that ramen noodles, instant ramen noodles work is the noodles are made, they're made very similar to any other type of noodles that don't usually contain eggs, which would be wheat, salt, and then something called kansui, if I'm saying it right, which is basically an alkaline water. Initially it came from lakes that were mineralized, and now it's often made by basically a mixture of water and baking soda. That's what gives ramen kind of a yellower color, and it makes the noodles sort of springy. Not all ramen noodles are wiggly like this. You can kind of see they're not all wiggly. There's also straight ramen noodles. That's another style that you will see. But most often in the US, if you're looking at the instant packets, you're going to be looking at the curly noodles. When you cook them, they come out like this, with all sorts of little ins and outs and wiggles to them. You can see them kind of jiggle when I move them because they have that springiness that comes from the particular way they're made with alkaline water. There are a million different ways to make and serve ramen. So the really basic requirement is that you have noodles and broth. That's what makes ramen. You can, of course, drain the broth off and eat the noodles plain, but then it wouldn't be a ramen bowl anymore. There are several different kinds of broth. The broth can be clear, or the broth can be kind of thick and milky looking. That most often happens when the broths are made with bones, typically pork bones, but it could be fish or chicken. Because it is a Japanese dish, I don't know how many people have heard of dashi. Dashi is a really common broth in Japan. It can be made with dried shiitake mushrooms like these. They have a more intense savory flavor than a fresh mushroom, and they make a nice sort of pale brown savory broth. Dashi can also be made with bonito flakes, which is like these little dried, thinly shaved pieces of tuna. I don't have that here to show you, but it sort of looks almost like it shredded paper, but thinner and translucent with kind of a pinkish tinge. And then it can also be made with seaweed, like wakame. It would be something like this, where it's this dried, sort of really dark greenish black colored seaweed, and that's another way to make dashi. Any of those could be a good broth for your ramen. Some types of ramen are also made with a miso broth. This is really in the colder regions of Japan. I'm sorry, that's backwards. But miso is a fermented soy paste that you can use to make soup. And you can also get shoyu ramen. Shoyu is like Japanese soy sauce. I think of it as being sort of smoother and mellower than regular soy sauce. I actually really like shoyu, and this is sort of my go-to for soy sauce on anything. It doesn't have that kind of, I guess I'd describe it as like a tanginess at the end, or a bite that you get with regular soy sauces. You don't get that with shoyu. And so you'll notice I'm saying it ramen, not ramen. Ramen is generally regarded as the correct pronunciation, unless you're Korean, and then you would actually say it ramyun or ramyen with a Y sound in there. Also, if you're having Korean ramen, you can put kimchi on it, which that is my favorite way to eat ramen. I love mine with asparagus, mushrooms, and kimchi. It might sound kind of weird, but I really recommend trying it. Kimchi is basically like sauerkraut, but it's made with that kind of curly Chinese cabbage, and you can see little bits of like chili seeds in there. There is seaweed in it, although it does not have a fishy taste. Sometimes it can be made with fish sauce, but this one's vegetarian. Ginger and garlic and usually whole chilies, which is why it's kind of red. So, what can you put on your ramen? A lot of us, like I said, are used to just seeing these little packets, and you just make the noodles and you eat it with chicken flavor or beef flavor or whatever other flavor the ramen claims to be. The kind I made today is a lemongrass ginger, which is a really aromatic, lovely kind of ramen flavor. It just sort of comes up into your sinuses and tastes really good. But that's not where I stop. If you're going to make ramen, you might as well go all the way. Some of the more common toppings that you'll see on ramen, well, if you're actually in Japan, there's a type of fermented bamboo shoots that you would see, which we don't have here. Butter and sweet corn are actually really popular ramen toppings. The wakame, like I showed you earlier, the seaweed, it kind of hydrates and gets sort of smooth and slippery in the broth. Nori, which you're probably familiar with as the wrapper for sushi, will get crumbled up and sprinkled on top of the ramen. Sliced pork is very common on top of ramen, as well as somewhat less common, but still pretty popular, sliced beef. You'll see on them as well. Mushrooms, especially enoki mushrooms, which are the long, skinny kind. Let's see, what else? I made a list for you guys. Let's see. Oh, bean sprouts and green onions are also something you'll see a lot of the time. You could use any kind of sprouts, but bean sprouts are thicker, so they hold up better to the heat of the broth. Let's see. Oh, sesame seeds. I like to put the black ones on because it just gives it that little extra interest visually while you're eating it. Garlic, chopped garlic is pretty common. Other types of greens. I actually, this you would probably not do in Japan. I actually used kale today in this, and spinach is pretty common for home cooks to mix into the ramen, even in Japan. Kimchi, of course, and then fat. You want to add some kind of fat because it sits on top of your broth. I don't think I can show you guys this without tipping it over. You want some kind of fat because it sticks to the noodles and gives it this lovely unctuous flavor while you're eating it. The most common ones would be pork fat and butter. I try to stay away from dairy personally, and not everybody wants animal products in their ramen, so I use coconut oil. Again, it's not necessarily the most traditional, but it's pretty easily accessible, and it'll serve the same purpose in your ramen. So the last thing I'm going to show you guys, some people don't like ramen because it's a little tricky to eat. You really got to use chopsticks if you don't want it to be a mess. So what I'm doing is I've got my little ramen noodles here in the cup with a little bit of greens, and I'm going to put a scoop of broth on it. So I made the broth separately so that this wouldn't be quite such a mess. So then you want to get your chopsticks. So these, I brought these from home. I don't like to use restaurant chopsticks, but fun fact about me, I collect chopsticks. So you probably don't have any handy. The wooden ones will work fine for this. So you want to grab your ramen, and you want to lift it up out of the bowl until it's not tangled with any more pieces, because if it's still tangled, you're going to have trouble when you go to eat it. And then you want to dip it back down into whatever broth you have once it's detangled, and that's when you're going to slurp. And that's how you eat ramen. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you want to try some, come on down to the store. I'll be doing this until about 5. Happy Monday, everybody. Oh, and happy eclipse.